Hey everyone, it's CurlyHairedHero, and today's the last day of Yu-Gi-Oh! Month, and today I have a somewhat special video. So, I've talked about them so much in grand majority of my videos. Here are the actual cards that I used to make when I was a lot younger. They've gone through a lot of different phases. These two here are one of the original ones. You can see here they have like a 3 on them, or it's supposed to be a 3 in crayon. This one has a 2. I later on learned that the crayon looks stupid, so I didn't do that again. The original card was actually in loose leaf, as you can see. It might be kind of hard to tell, but I drew this guy in an actual loose leaf, and then I cut it and pasted him onto this printer paper, which is basically what I ended up using for all the other cards later down the line. And these early versions, as you can see, they have an attack, a defense, and then an HP. And that's because they were based off Dungeon Dice monsters. That's sort of the first iteration that they went through. There was basically just Dungeon Dice monsters. I just made my own version of Dungeon Dice monsters. I made the dice. It wouldn't like open up. I mean, I was working on different versions of making it open up, but I did make my own like custom dice that you could roll, and it would have its own custom faces on it. So that's what I would use on this game, and I would just use like a chessboard or checkerboard board, and then use the pieces to actually create the steps that the players would, or the characters or the monsters would walk through on the board. And then somewhere down the line I ended up getting this like laminated kind of thing. It's not actually laminated because it's only one side. It's you had to like, when I was growing up, you had to like get books, but you were forced to put book covers on them, and there were certain ones that were like basically see-through. So I got some of that and I put it on some of the cards, which is why it looks like that. But you can see back then I kind of just did whatever. I have here Cobra Commander and fucking Link as a kid. Clearly not things that I would be able to use. But then, later on I started doing some other stuff. Some of these aren't mine. These were actually my friend that drew some of these weird looking ones. This is another one. I ended up playing around with the format. So I ended up doing it here on the side, and then having the quote-unquote monster in the middle, so they had more space for the art, and it was kind of like more stylish. This worked out a little bit. At this point, what I had actually done, I had moved away from this version where I was doing the Dungeon Dice monsters kind of stuff, and I had moved on to a more sort of Yu-Gi-Oh style where you would play the monsters. These still had HP, but I think I kind of just ignored it and just used, the attack and defense. You can literally just play an attack and defense like if it was an actual Yu-Gi-Oh card. And then later on, I literally made it into just straight up Yu-Gi-Oh. In terms of like, I had here the the name, and then there was the stars. I would just circle it and just write the number of stars that they were. Because it was just easier for me. Because I always have trouble sometimes actually seeing what a card is or what level it is. Sometimes when I have to count it, I lose track because I am, stupid like that, I guess. But then I had an attribute here. I had here written down the type, and then the attack and defense values here, which is cool. The only thing is that these were in Spanish because, like as I've said, they were in, fix up that a little bit, sorry, got a little bright. So yeah, these are all in Spanish, because at the time I was in a Spanish living country, so it was surprisingly a good way for me to learn how to read and write Spanish. But yeah, a bunch of these cards are in Spanish, at least the effects are. Some of the names are in English, which is weird, but I ended up making a lot of these. But they were just straight up Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of they had the same exact attributes and the same exact types and everything as it were in normal Yu-Gi-Oh! These I will get to in a moment. And then yes, sometime early on, I actually had the levels written as it was an actual Yu-Gi-Oh. This was based off something. A lot of these monsters were based off things I would find like video game magazines for games that I could never owned. And I would end up just sort of drawing them instead. And I have a lot of characters that look kind of like Link. This is what Link looked like to me, and I would kind of vary how it would look. You can see my disgusting handwriting. I can't even read out what he says or what he does. So he's a plant monster. Golpe. Golpe means hit. Right? Does it mean flip? Maybe this was a flip effect. Destruye un monstruo tipo insecto o dinosaurio o dragón en el campo. Something se el que lo ataque también. Oh god, looks so bad. But something about destroying dragons, dinosaurs, and or dragons. Very weird effect. So I had a lot of these really weird monsters, but then somewhere down the line, oh here we go. This is one of the original ones. Whew. Well, this one I think was, yeah, this was different. So this is one of the original cards that precedes. So it's after this. I still made some of them in, I think, loose leaf for whatever stupid reason. You can see here that we went from 30 over to 300. And then these other ones here, they have, 1,400. So the numbers changed. I used to have my sort of own ruling where like you would be able to use everything all at once, and then later on I kind of got rid of all of these, so these were kind of just there. But these are one of the old ones. So this is when I transitioned over from Dungeon Dice to like normal Yu-Gi-Oh, which is why the attack points are a lot higher. So you can summon this a lot easier. Then somewhere in between that, my friend taught me sort of how to play Magic, which is why it has Magic written on the back. So not only did I make fake Yu-Gi-Oh cards, but I also made fake Magic cards apparently. So this is why they have the lower attack and defense, and that should have been the cost for them. I have no idea what the hell that says right now. And then I don't know why for some of the spell or trap cards I just kind of drew the designs, or not the design, like attributes for them on the side here. So this is a continuous trap, this is a counter trap, and then I had here little symbols here to denote their rarity. I think this I stole from Pokemon, because before this we would actually have yeah, so it was first, before any of this stuff, it was I had a set of actual Pokemon cards that I didn't know how to like play the actual card game with. So I would treat them as Yu-Gi-Oh cards. So I had, for example, a Spearow that had Mirror Move. So I would treat that as Mirror Force. And, certain monsters need tributes and all this other kind of stuff. Which was really funny because I actually taught how to play this kind of game with other people. So it's kind of ironic that they actually were able to memorize what all the cards were and, play them out. But then after that, I was like, no, fuck that. I don't want to use these Pokemon cards because, I only had a certain amount of them, and I was only given to them, giving these cards, or I found them, but I never, had the money to go buy them, and my parents definitely didn't want to go buy me cards. So that's when I started doing the Dungeon Dice Monster stuff. Then after that, we went over to sort of a mix of Dungeon Dice Monsters and Yu-Gi-Oh! Then we just went to straight up just fucking Yu-Gi-Oh! With, all these cards here. I even started at some point, I remember I left and I came over here to the States briefly, and I started making cards here. I think they have, the different symbol in the back. And I started making cards in America, and then that's when I started like the whole idea of booster packs and sets. So I started like denoting cards that were part of a certain set, quote unquote. But I don't remember if I still have any of those, because there weren't too many of those that I made. And then during that time, my friend made these cards, which were, you know, 4-in-1 little monsters that he made. Here's another one of those other cards. Here's a giant titty teacher capturing some kid. Here's a light magician instead of dark magician, which is, you know, pretty funny. Here's a Pikachu. Straight up Pikachu. This is Pikachu right there. And, you know, he just has like lightning bolts and goggles and shit. These cards, somewhere later on, I was trying to make up a new card game. So I wanted to separate myself from, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! And all that stuff, and I wanted my own legitimate card game that I can actually make, you know, into an actual game, you know, maybe sell somewhere down the line, because I wanted to like get into this kind of business. So I had these set of cards where I just drew them with no attack or like any of that stuff. I just drew the art, and then I was gonna like stash them away, draw a bunch of them, and then later on figure out sort of how the game worked a little bit better, and then use these cards for that. So that's what that one is. I'm trying to see if I can find anything else. Yeah, here are another set of those. So I tried to quote unquote be as detailed as I can with these. Didn't really do a great job. I remember using this guy a lot. I say using a lot because, you know, me and my friend, we would play a lot. We would play this. We would kind of get a bunch of cards, make it into a deck, and then actually play, which was really fun. But it's funny concerning how much, you know, lack of balance I had. Like, for example, we have a card here that just straight up makes a copy of a monster, makes 2 copies of a monster. That's fucking crazy. And in this one, your opponent cannot use magic trap or spells. Or specials, I mean. At all. Like, legitimately, they just cannot. It's hilarious. I called it lost game. I mean, if you can't do any of that stuff, you kind of lost the game. And here is Dark Magician, but as a warrior. So basically Buster Blader before I realized that that's basically what Buster Blader was. Some of them came out pretty cool. These were in the later versions. So after I came back here in America, I went back over there to the Dominican Republic, made some more cards, came back here, I was on my own, feeling nostalgic, and then I made these next set of cards, which are a lot better looking in terms of detail and their, you know, their stuff. You know, I was doing a lot better of like balancing and all this stuff, which was really cool. Yeah, I think that's where all these came from. All these random cards that look, you know, not horrible, but they look a little bit better. This one, haha, I remember this. I don't remember. I remember for the Dungeon Dice Monster one, I had drew a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon as a card, and it came out really well because I was kind of, you know, following it along. I had like the image, and I was like, I wouldn't say tracing, but you know. And it came out really well, and my friend really liked using it. And then one day, as like a joke, I guess, he drew hats on it, and he made it like a magical dragon, and I just ended up making it into an actual card. So it's basically just Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon, just with, you know, hats. And I think this one, the limbs are like Rayman, just to make it look a little bit more, you know, magical and whatnot. But yeah, a lot of these cards I would watch something on TV and or something of the sort, and then I would just go on and draw them. Here, like this, I saw like an image of a virus in some textbook, so I drew it like that. This grenade is probably from a show, or I was playing Metal Gear or something like that, and I made a grenade that looked like that. This is just straight up a snake. I like drawing like these snake kind of patterns because it's kind of easy sometimes. But it's just a fucking snake with a fucking baby's pacifier as a face and a flaming tail. I don't know why. That just occurred to me. But yeah, there were a lot of these, and here's a fucking crab, deadly crab. Was what that one was called. But I had a lot of these, and I kind of just drew a whole fuck ton of them. But as I was saying, I was trying to draw, or I was trying to come up with a new sort of game, which I think is what is in this. But I was trying to come up with a new game, which is why I drew those separately, and then I ended up coming up with these. Got some kind of dust or something on them. That's how old these are. So, in addition to having, you know, our own cards, we made our own, I guess, OC duelist or whatever. So I would make these sort of like trainer cards, I guess, or duelist cards, and you know, it would be the character that you were dueling as. Here's their name, and then you would see here they would have their wins, their losses, and their draws, if any. And then somewhere down the line, I got into the habit of coming up with like special duel discs for them, and you know, they have their own thing here. And this was sort of the symbol I had for cards that weren't like, you know, actual playing cards. But I think it's just these. Okay, yeah. And then this should probably be a better example. This here is sort of the mark of that game that I was working on. It's just a Triforce on top of an upside down triangle. And then I just made an amalgamation of some words here. I'm not really sure if I had a meaning behind that, but it's basically just an amalgamation of stuff. So this game was, again, basically Yu-Gi-Oh! It was in English, at least this time, fully. There was no Spanish. The only thing is that the attributes and the types were unique. I wonder if I have that book somewhere. I have it somewhere. I have an actual book where I wrote down what everything was while I was, you know, trying to come up with it, but I don't want to move and knock down the camera. But they had, yeah, specific attributes and also specific types that go with those attributes. In addition, every card was either male, female, or genderless. And also, the level system was a lot simplified. So you know how, like, in Yu-Gi-Oh! You have levels 1 through 4 before synchro summoning and exceed summoning, all that stuff. That stuff was kind of pointless, right? In like normal Yu-Gi-Oh! Aside from like activating certain effects. So I got rid of all of that, and I just made it, hey, this card, you distribute 2 monsters. Hey, this card has a 0, you can just summon it. So I would just write that down plainly there. The effects are basic Yu-Gi-Oh! Effects. The attack is in the hundreds, because I thought that anything lower than that was a little too like meh. But I don't like the like 10,000s or anything like that. That's why I don't like Vanguard sometimes, because the numbers are a little too big and it's a little bit like hard to like keep track of what's going on. Yu-Gi-Oh! I thought was fine, but I wanted to differentiate myself from Yu-Gi-Oh! So I made the numbers a lot smaller. The other thing was that you can also have spell and or traps. I think it was here spells and triggers is what traps were called. So you also had spell cards that you had to like pay a cost to use, and basically it was really dumb sort of method. I don't know if I have any of them, but you would either have one of these, which was like a spell token, so you would play it and it would have it would do nothing and it would just go into the graveyard, or you would play a normal spell card with 0 cost and it would go to the graveyard. And then you can use another one of these cards by kind of like, you know, using them up in your graveyard for that one turn. So as long as you had them, so you have it to basically play other spell cards in that same turn to then basically tribute them like this, so you can use one of these more powerful cards. So that's how I balanced out my cards, because I didn't like the thought of, you know, the ban list and all that other stuff. So this was my way of balancing out my game. And then for trap cards, what I would do for those is for triggers, they I think had the same thing. Typically they didn't have cost because they had a specific criteria that triggers them. That's why they were called triggers. So this one was triggered by an opponent's attack. So everything was triggered by something, including some of them that are like triggered by point value, which means you can literally activate it whenever. And you can use these things as soon as you set them. It's not like in Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you had to set a card and wait a turn to activate them. You can set them, and if the criteria is met, you can activate it immediately. And then the other thing was I had these monsters here. Kind of really showed them, but they were tokens. I called them token monsters or pawns. That's what they were. They were pawns, and you can use these to summon high-level monsters. So you can, or rather, no, this was the only way to summon high-level monsters. That's what it was. So if you had a monster that was like, had a 2 as a cost to summon them, you had to discard 2 pawns, and so on and so forth. And then the pawns came with certain effects. So once you destroy them, like this one, what does it say? Negate effects that come out of the grave while this card is in your grave. So it's basically Necro Rally once you use it. So pretty good effects that you can get from doing that. In addition to that, what was I going to say? That's the only way that you can summon high-level monsters, unless it was a specific type of monster, which I think was like Mystic or something. I forgot what the actual name of it. But those you can actually do like normal Yu-Gi-Oh! Where you tribute your monsters. And some of them, they're basically dragon cards. But those were the only ones that you can use monsters on your field to tribute and summon. Other than that, you have to use this pawn system. Which kind of sucks, because your hand is going to go to shit to summon these monsters. But I also had, to sort of mitigate that, had these extra deck monsters, quote unquote. These were, I think, they were called Royals or something like that. These were your extra deck. These were your boss monsters, and they were like literally your boss monsters, because they all, you can summon them. These cards you can summon them whenever you need a specific pawn to summon them, and then like anything else, so it's kind of like Pokemon for like attacks, where like sometimes you need a specific energy, but then you can use any other energy for that, stuff like that. So I need specifically this and then another one, because this guy has a cost of 2 in order to summon this guy, but I can summon them whenever. And they have really strong effects. Like this one, I think, can do a bunch of stuff. Like I discard a card and I can attack twice. I can discard a card and do a bunch of different effects. They would usually have pretty high attack and stuff like that. The only caveat is if at the end of your turn, if this card were to be destroyed, or if it is more specifically still in your graveyard at the end of the turn that it was summoned, you lose the duel. So, you can summon these strong monsters ASAP, but once they're gone, it's over. So that was my quote-unquote caveat for these extra deck monsters. And that was basically it. That was the game that I came up with after that. It was still very similar to Yu-Gi-Oh! Because you still play monsters in attack mode and attack. You still had life points. I had this sense of borrowed this from a game that I played. This sense of you can. So I had life points in the reverse was one of the main things. So when you get attacked, you cure burn, which is what I would call it. You want to fill up your meter, and once your meter fills up, you're done. So you lose. And I had this sort of, I guess, lore or whatever you call it, where all the dual discs, they had this like this little bubble in the middle of them, and that would fill up with all the damage you take. And once you lose, it would just blow up. Not like harm, like the dual disc would blow up, but just that little thing would just go like, and it's kind of like gives it a nice little dramatic, like, shit, I lost, kind of thing. But yeah, the meter would fill up, And then there was also a specific state that you could do. So if certain cards, they would just completely crack your meter. I think it was like overdrive or something like that. And they would just crack it. And I think it would count for how much you filled it up. So if you, I think the max like damage was 600. So once everyone reached 600, they would lose. But if you filled it up to like 500, and then you did this skill, you would no longer take any burn damage. The next time you take burn damage, you will automatically lose. So if you get hit once, after that, like one, hit of damage, you lose. But then you would be able to use a powerful skill with accordance to how much you had at that point. So if I had 500 and then I cracked it, my monster would gain that much attack or something like that. That was one of the other things that I had. So it was a lot of little variations that I had. I was trying to keep it similar enough to Yu-Gi-Oh! So it was so fun and familiar, but distinguish it and make it different and my own, so I can kind of, I guess, legally or actually put my name on it. But I had a shit ton of like these little like decks that I made, each corresponding to like certain characters, and they each have their own like archetypes that they can use, and specific cards. Like this one was really fun. This guy has all birds. I had a lot of fun coming up with this one. Like his, I haven't drawn that one yet. He doesn't have a boss monster, so he is, a bird guy, and like his dual disc, for whatever reason, doesn't close like normal dual disc. They stay open, and then his binoculars, they're named Simon, which he uses for bird watching. Really weird. And he had like worm, and he has all these birds, and I spent all this time researching birds to make all these cards, which was really fun. I was hoping somewhere down the line I can actually make some use of this, and I remember at some point I had a friend that I used to play UVD with, and I kept telling him a bunch of times I was going to make this game and whatnot. It was going to be online, it was going to be great, and I even interviewed him or something like that, and I got a bunch of info to like make a character for him, and once the game comes out and all that stuff. But obviously I haven't yet. Here's a fish, with a cowboy fish with two guns, one of my more favorite designs, and here's a kung fu hippo. Here's a dog, samurai dog. Here's a horse with a giant sword, and then this one's a turtle with a fucking bazooka. But yeah, this was a lot of fun, and I'm hoping that maybe someday I'll be able to actually make something of this. I did, I have been working on an actual game, so it sort of has this great loop back around, because it's sort of dungeon dice monster-y. It's more like the Labyrinth, like that episode where Yugi and Joy face off the Paradox Brother and they have to walk through the labyrinth. It's more based on that, and I'm hoping I can get all these fun ideas that I had from all of this and then import it into that. But yeah, these are the cards that I'm always talking about whenever I make a Yu-Gi-Oh video. It's like, oh yeah, back in my day I was poor, so I made my own fucking cards. This is what it was. I don't really think I have anything else here specifically. I wanted to show a lot of different characters, and they all have like these little they have their own symbol, and then they have their own little quote which describes it. Like this guy was the unbeaten assassin, and what's another one? This one here, the borrowed hero, because he was from a different, I don't know what to call it, different type of thing I was working on, and I incorporated it into this card game thing. But yeah, that's that. Stay fresh.